A fierce gust swept across the parched Wyoming prairie as dusk painted the sky in bruised shades of crimson and indigo. Wind howled through the barren mesquite and rattled the loose boards of a dilapidated market stall, where the echoes of barter and whispered rumors intertwined with the slow cadence of a frontier night. Amid this tumult, a solitary stagecoach creaked into Drabone's bustling market, a brief, fleeting oasis in an otherwise relentless desert of dust and loneliness. Caleb Harrow, a stoic widower in his 40s with eyes as weathered as the land itself, stepped off the stagecoach with a quiet determination etched into every line of his face. His heavy duster, a faded, threadbare relic of better days, fluttered by his legs in the evening breeze, and his boots stirred up small clouds of red dust with each deliberate step. Caleb's heart, scarred by the loss of his beloved wife and child, bore the weight of silent prayers and broken dreams. In every moment he sought solace and, perhaps in secret, redemption on the vast, unyielding prairie. At a stall crowded with faded trinkets and the haggard voices of traders, Caleb's gaze fell upon a young woman who seemed to stand apart from the rest. She was slender and resolute, her dark hair loosely braided, and her eyes carried a mournful clarity that spoke of unspeakable hardship. Beside her, swaddled in a threadbare blanket, but nestled close against her side, lay an infant, a tiny bundle whose soft cries contrasted sharply with the harsh world around them. The young woman's modest attire and the sliver of a gold band, barely visible on her wrist, hinted at a secret treasure, a vestige of family heritage she had long lost. In that fleeting moment, Caleb sensed a kinship born of shared loss and unspoken hope. The market's clamor dwindled into a series of soft, intermittent murmurs as Caleb approached the young woman. His voice, low and measured, carried the quiet strength of experience as he asked gently, "Are you in need of help?" The girl, her eyes meeting as a mixture of guarded caution and desperate relief, nodded slowly, the weight of her silence laden with 1,000 untold stories. Though she offered no name at first, the spark in her gaze told of more than words ever could. By her side, the infant stirred, eliciting a tender smile from Caleb, a smile that was both a balm and a promise of better things. As the dying light gave way to the deepening purple of twilight, Caleb led the young woman and her child away from the chaos of Drabone's market. The stagecoach's rhythmic creaking faded behind them, replaced by the gentle, uneven tread of their steps on the dusty trail. The vast Wyoming prairie stretched before them, a land of endless horizon and quiet majesty, where sagebrush whispered secrets to the wind and ancient mesas stood like silent guardians of forgotten dreams. In that relentless, expansive solitude, Caleb found a spark of purpose, to offer shelter not only to a desperate soul, but perhaps to heal a part of his own broken heart. They arrived at his modest adobe homestead, a cluster of low, sun-baked buildings with walls scarred by time, yet glowing softly under the light of a single lantern that flickered like a hopeful heartbeat. The homestead, known to few as Silver Seraph Homestead, seemed to embrace them in its weathered arms. As Caleb guided them inside, the warmth of the low-burning hearth battled against the chill of the encroaching desert night, and the subtle aroma of wood smoke mingled with the scent of aged clay. Here, in the gentle confines of his sanctuary, Caleb offered what little he had, a meal, a bed, and, above all, protection from a world that had shown them nothing but cruelty. Inside the modest kitchen, Caleb set about preparing a simple supper. He kindled a small fire in the open hearth and arranged a battered pot over its flames. The sound of flickering firelight and the soft sizzle of simmering stew filled the room, creating a quiet symphony that soothed the grief etched into every weary bone. The young woman, still silent but her eyes now softening with cautious trust, watched as he worked steadily. For a long while neither spoke, a silence that spoke volumes of shared despair and mutual resilience. At last, as the stew reached a gentle boil, the girl's trembling lips murmured, "My name is Mara." The single word, delicate and tentative, hung nearly as sacred as the gold band glinting on her wrist, a symbol of hope, resilience, and perhaps of a hidden legacy. Caleb offered a small, affirming nod, his own voice thick with unshed emotion, "I am Caleb," he replied simply. In that quiet confession of names, a fragile bond was kindled. Outside, the desert wind carried with it distant echoes of judgment and supplication. Rumors that sometimes swept through frontier markets like a plague, branding those who were different as outcasts. But in that moment, within the warm embrace of his homestead, Caleb resolved to care for Mara and her child, whom she called Jem, no matter the cost. Yet beneath the gentle promises and the sizzling warmth of the hearth, an unsettling tension simmered. As Caleb prepared the meal, his keen ears caught a sound, a soft, deliberate crunch on the hard, dusty ground outside. He paused, his senses sharpening like the keen edge of a well-used blade. Through the narrow, grimy window, he could just make out a shadow moving in the periphery, a lone rider whose presence seemed to draw the cold chill of the desert even closer. The shadow lingered, silent and watchful, its eyes, or so Caleb imagined, fixed on Mara's delicate gold band. A shiver ran down his spine, for that fleeting glimpse hinted at danger, a face from a past Mara might not wish to confront, a reminder of a legacy that reached back with bitter clenched fists. The quiet hush of the homestead was suddenly broken by the soft clatter of hooves as the shadow faded into the vast darkness beyond. Yet the question remained, haunting Caleb's thoughts as he served the modest supper. Who was that rider, and what secret had drawn his gaze to Mara? The unanswered whisper of that sighting left a lingering tension, a promise of more revelations hidden in the desert's shifting sands. As midnight approached, the homestead fell into a fragile, heavy silence. Caleb sat alone near the dying embers of the fire, his mind adrift in memories of a lost love and of nights spent in silent prayer for a miracle, a promise his wife had once dreamed of to restore hope to barren lands. Across the room, Mara cradled little Jem in her arms, her eyes distant yet filled with a quiet defiance. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken questions and the promise of dangerous truths yet uncovered. In that solemn darkness, every heartbeat became a prayer, every whisper of the wind a warning. The golden band on Mara's wrist shimmered faintly under the sparse light, as though it contained a secret too potent to be measured, a hidden inheritance, perhaps, that would one day transform their fates. The troubadour cry of distant, lonely hooves and murmuring desert echoes marked the night as a time of reckoning, a time when the past might finally come calling. As the desert held its breath and the homestead's adobe walls guarded the fragile lives within, Caleb resolved to sleep with one eye open, knowing that the ghost of that lone rider would not soon be forgotten. In the quiet, with the resilient pulse of the frontier echoing in his heart, he silently vowed, "No matter the storm, you are safe here." Yet, as the homestead embraced him in its modest sanctuary, the lingering question in the chill Nevada night remained. Who truly pursues Mara, and what echo of betrayal lies hidden in that gold band? Dawn's chill kissed the Wyoming homestead as a pale light crept over the vast prairie, where sagebrush swayed and dusty winds whispered secrets through the mesquite. The remnants of the night's tension still lingered like a fragile mist over Silver Seraph Homestead. Far from Drabone's bustle, the adobe walls stood resolute against the awakening sky, their rough surfaces softened by the first rays of a new day. In this serene moment, the earlier specter of a lone rider with a watchful, dangerous gaze hovering over Mara's gold band continued to haunt Caleb's thoughts. Now, with the threat temporarily receded into the shifting light, the quiet promise of the morning offered a small window for healing and purpose. Inside the modest homestead, Caleb Harrow moved with deliberate care, the lingering sorrow in his eyes, etched by years of loss, softened as he stepped lightly into the warm, inviting glow of the kitchen. Beside him, Mara, still cautious and guarded, cradled little Jem in her arms. In the low murmur of the hearth's crackling fire and the soft clink of well-worn utensils, a tender intimacy began to blossom between them. Their shared silences spoke volumes. Caleb's stoic determination to protect these fragile lives and Mara's silent plea for safety from a past that had scarred her. After serving a simple breakfast of flatbread and strong black coffee, Caleb led Mara and Jem out to the courtyard. The adobe home, built from sun-baked clay and weathered timbers, bore the marks of many harsh seasons, yet it radiated a quiet warmth in the light of early day. Outside, the expansive prairie beckoned with its rolling, sepia-toned hills and distant mesas standing like ancient, stoic guardians. The unsaid grief in Caleb's eyes mingled with a glimmer of hope, fueled by memories of his late wife's dream to restore life to barren land, a dream that now seemed to call out to him in every whisper of wind. Together, they set about the morning tasks that slowly knit life into the homestead's routine. Caleb led Mara to the well, where a wooden bucket, worn smooth by many seasons, descended into a shaft of cool, fading water. With measured steps, she helped lift the water, her hands steady despite the exhaustion that lingered behind her gaze. As they filled a set of large earthen jars, Caleb's mind wandered back to nights spent praying for a miracle, days when he'd whispered to the heavens, longing for a sign that his wife's dream might yet be fulfilled. The barren fields around Silver Seraph had long cried out for renewal, and though the land remained stubbornly arid, something in Mara's quiet resolve stirred a faint echo of hope within him. Later, while repairing a sagging section of the wooden fence, Caleb noticed something unexpected. Buried in the folds of Mara's tattered satchel, a crinkled piece of parchment had slipped free. Gently, he retrieved it, careful not to startle her. Under the gentle light of the rising sun, he saw that it was a cryptic deed, an aged document whose faded ink bore an emblem, a crescent moon embraced by a solitary star. This emblem, faintly mirrored in the engraving adorning her gold band, hinted at a long-forgotten claim to a fertile valley, a legacy that Mara's family might have once held. Caleb's callous fingers trembled as he traced the delicate lines, and his heart stirred with a fragile promise of a miracle that might restore not only the land but also the hope of a better future. Mara, noticing his intense scrutiny, hesitated before speaking. "I have carried this with me for years," she murmured, voice soft and livened by a mix of defiance and fear. "My family was betrayed, and all we had, their claim to these lands, was stolen from us. I kept it hidden, afraid of what it might mean." Her eyes shone with unspoken sorrow as she clutched the small deed to her heart. The revelation was heavy. In that moment, the deed seemed to pulse with an almost sacred energy, a promise that the fertile valley described could be real, and that it might be the very miracle Caleb's late wife had prayed for. Caleb's brow furrowed as he considered the implications. His wife had dreamed of a land reborn, of parched fields transformed by the gentle bounty of water and fertile soil. If Mara's deed indeed pointed to a hidden valley, a place where life could flourish even on the harshest prairie, then perhaps this miracle was within reach. Yet the fragile hope was burdened by the fear of discovery. As Caleb pondered softly, the distant, anxious murmur of the wind reached his ears like a warning. Before long, Amos, the loyal and weathered ranch hand who had accompanied Caleb since the market, emerged from the shadow of a nearby barn. His lined face was serious as he reported, "Sir, I found fresh tracks by the western fence. They're not like the usual cattle prints. They seem deliberate, as though someone's been riding hard in search of something." His measured tone betrayed concern beneath his gruff exterior. The news of renewed tracks cast a pall over the morning. The spectral threat of the shadowy rider was far from over. As the day unfurled, Caleb and Mara continued their work amid the ceaseless chorus of the prairie. Over the low hum of clattering water and quiet labor, Caleb's mind remained preoccupied with the discovery of the deed, its crisp parchment now holding the promise of a fertile valley. Every hurled stone and every repaired post reminded him of his wife's forgotten dream, a dream that, like the soft morning light, had begun to break through the darkness of his grief. "This might be the sign we've been waiting for," he confided quietly to Mara while mending a splintered fence board. His tone was cautious yet imbued with a raw, unguarded hope. Mara's eyes flitted to the gold band on her wrist as though seeking reassurance. "I do not know if I should trust what it tells," she whispered, more to herself than to him, "for it bears the weight of my family's betrayal." Her words were laced with quiet anguish, a mixture of fear and longing to reclaim what had been lost. In the delicate interplay of glances between them, a slow, controlled trust began to build, a bond forged by shared hardship and the promise of redemption. As the sun climbed higher and the heat pressed relentlessly upon the land, a sudden rustle outside shattered the measured calm. Amos returned, urgency in his every step. He held up a small, roughly cut scrap of paper marked with an ominous symbol, a mark identical to the sensitive engraving on Mara's gold band and echoed in the deed. "I found this near the tracks," he announced in a low, steady voice. "It seems they left more than just footprints. There's a message, too." The scrap of paper, weathered and frayed, carried a single line of text in hasty, jagged script. "What does the deed hide?" The words were a grim reminder of the danger that lurked beyond the homestead's protective walls and raised burdens that had gone unsaid. They spoke of an impending reckoning, of a betrayal that had yet to reveal its full scope. Caleb's heart sank as he read the message. The dread of past transgressions and the possibility of a powerful adversary searching for Mara's secret tightened his throat. His eyes met Mara's, and in that silent exchange, he could see the vulnerability behind her guarded strength. "We must be cautious," he said firmly, his voice reverberating with both determination and quiet tragedy. "We have a secret here worth more than any man's greed, and I will protect it with all that I am." Mara nodded, trembling slightly as she clutched the gold band and the deed close to her chest. Her internal struggle was laid bare in the soft frown that touched her lips. Was she ready to reveal the full truth of her family's legacy, even if it meant inviting further danger into her life? The wind outside began to rise again, carrying with it distant echoes of hoofbeats and wary voices that mingled with the whispers of traders from Drabone's market. The homestead's quiet resolve trembled beneath the weight of newfound menace. As the days slipped into the long, suspect afternoon, Caleb, Mara, and Amos gathered in the cool shade near the veranda. The silences between them were heavy with anticipation. Every stifled breath a prayer against the encroaching darkness. In that fragile moment, amidst the shifting light and dust, the scrap of paper lay like a harbinger of doom. Its cryptic question, "What does a deed hide?" hung in the air, fueling the uncertainty of the day. The once comforting hum of daily labors was now punctuated by a rising dread. The signs told of the threat drawing nearer, of someone who would stop at nothing to seize the miracle contained within Mara's secret. As Caleb's eyes scanned the horizon, the distant sound of a harmonica began to echo, a soulful, sorrowful melody that mingled with the sharp clash of the wind against the homestead walls. It was a sound both beautiful and foreboding, weaving through the murmurs of nature like a lament. In that resonant chord of music, the question of treachery lingered. Who would dare to disturb the sanctity of their newfound refuge? The shadows grew longer as the sun dipped lower, and the homestead protective adobe took on an eerie glow. The scrap of paper, the deed, the gold band, they all spoke of a legacy and a destiny still uncertain. In the tense quiet that followed Amos's revelation, Caleb's gaze hardened with resolve. He knew in his heart that they could no longer hide. The secrets of the past demanded to be answered, and danger rode upon the winds of the prairie. As the ominous scrap of paper's question echoes in the stark afternoon, and hoofbeats thunder nearer, what hidden truth does the deed conceal? And will the approaching menace shatter the fragile hope they've so carefully nurtured? Dusk cloaked the Wyoming prairie in sorrowful shadows as hoofbeats grew louder, echoing over wind-swept sagebrush and dust-choked mesas. The fading light painted the sky in streaks of melancholy purple and bruised rose, and in that somber twilight the secret of the deed began to unravel. Caleb Harrow stood at the threshold of Silver Seraph Homestead, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the approaching hoofbeats stirred an ominous dirge. Within his callous grasp, the cracked parchment of Mara's deed, bearing the crescent moon intertwined with a solitary star, glimmered faintly, as though etched in hope and sorrow alike. It was in this hushed, volatile moment that the truth of the past, buried deep beneath betrayal, began to demand its reckoning. Inside, Mara sat cross-legged on the cool, unadorned floor of the small living area. Little Jem, wrapped in a tattered blanket, cooed softly beside her, the remnants of the day's weary labors, the scratch of her fingers against frayed cloth, the soft rustle of the satchel she had clutched since leaving Drabone, formed a careful symphony of life in a place where hope was as precious as water. Slowly, With a tremor edging her voice, Mara unfolded the fated deed. "This paper, it tells of a valley," she whispered. Her eyes, haunted yet determined, shifted between the delicate inscription and the gold band glinting on her wrist. "My family once claimed fertile lands there, lands abundant with water and promise. They were betrayed, stolen away by a ruthless cattle baron who framed us for a crime we did not commit. That loss, that shame, left me with nothing but this deed, and now I carry its secret with me." Every word fell like a quiet lament, each syllable a secret confession of wounds never healed. Caleb listened in silence, his heart heavy with echoes of his own grief. In the subdued light of the homestead, memories of his late wife, her warm laughter, her unyielding dream of restoring their barren patch of earth, flooded him. He recalled nights spent beneath bitter starlight, whispering desperate prayers for a miracle that might one day revive the arid soil. "I have long prayed for a sign," he finally murmured, his voice rough with unshed tears. "For a way to make this land fertile again, so that what was lost may be reborn." His eyes, dark and pierced with longing, locked with Mara's, and in that silent exchange lay the unspoken promise of redemption and protection. Mara's features, etched with years of survival and unspoken sorrow, tightened in quiet resolve. "I never wish to burden anyone with what I carry," she said, her tone fragile and laced with a mixture of fear and determination. "My family was shamed and left destitute by those who coveted our rightful claim. I keep this deed hidden, afraid that if the truth is known, it will bring ruin upon us." She paused, as if weighing the risk of revealing too much, her gaze turning away toward the small window where the last vestiges of daylight struggled against the gathering darkness. "But perhaps I must let the truth come to light, even if it condemns me to more loss." Before Caleb could offer gentle reassurance, Amos, the wise and weathered ranch hand, burst into the room from the side door with a grave expression. He held a rough scrap of paper in one callous hand, his eyes clouded by concern. "Sir, miss," he announced in his low, deliberate voice, "I've seen fresh tracks by the western fence, and I found this nailed to the old post." He unwrapped the scrap carefully, revealing another cryptic message scrawled in hurried, jagged ink: "Surrender the deed or face ruin." The note's stark warning reverberated in the still air like a foretelling of doom. The tension in the room thickened as Caleb's eyes hardened upon reading the note. Agony and resolve warred in his gaze. He felt the lost promise of his wife's dreams aching within him. The deed, with its faint celestial emblem, now represented not only Mara's hidden heritage, but also the miracle he had once dared to pray for, a miracle that could restore life to the barren land, transforming desolation into abundance. Yet that very promise had become a magnet for those driven by greed and vengeance. A moment of heavy silence fell as Caleb set the scrap note on the worn oak table, its edges curled with the passage of time. Outside, the low thud of hoofbeats receded for an instant, as if the encroaching threat was pausing to draw a breath amid the cruelty of the plains. In that fragile respite, Caleb knelt beside Mara. His voice, soft yet imbued with iron will, broke the silence. "We will not yield to their demands. Your secret, the promise of this fertile valley, is our hope. I will protect it, and I will protect you and little Jem." His words resonated with a quiet vow, a declaration that past betrayals and cruel ambitions would not rob them of their future. Mara, tears glistening in her determined eyes, reached out a trembling hand and brushed away a smudge of dirt from her face. "I have carried this burden alone for so long," she confessed in a barely audible whisper, "always fearful of what might come if the truth of our family's legacy is unveiled." Her voice wavered between defiance and despair, and in that moment the golden band on her wrist, worn smooth by years of endless struggle, seemed to throb with significance. "Perhaps it is time," she hesitated, "for the miracle to awaken, even if it means facing that which I dread most." Outside, the storm-hazed twilight deepened as the wind's sigh grew into an almost mournful lament. The homestead's adobe walls, illuminated in a sepia glow by the flickering lanterns, bore witness to this fragile moment of commitment. Caleb rose slowly and walked to the door, casting a quick glance at the horizon where the last echoes of hoofbeats were returning, louder and more insistent than before. "I will scout the valley," he said, his voice resolute yet laced with a trace of fear. "The deed tells us where the crescent meets the star, the ridge where water may flow once more, where our promised land lies hidden. We must confirm its promise before they take it from us." His eyes shone with a mixture of determination and a silent prayer to his departed wife, who had envisioned a future reborn from barren soil. Mara watched him, her heart pounding in tandem with the urgent rhythm of the approaching threat. She recalled the painful memories of her family's betrayal, the shame that had driven her into silence, and now wondered if revealing the secret would set her free or condemn her further. "Caleb," she murmured softly, her words heavy with vulnerability. "What if our hope is swayed in danger? What if the truth brings more ruin than rescue?" Her voice trembled, echoing the raw uncertainty of her past. Caleb turned back then, his gaze steady as he briefly placed a hand over hers. "We must risk it for the sake of our souls," he replied with measured resolve. "The miracle we seek is not merely for the land, but for the healing of our hearts. I have lost too much to let fear rule us." His voice, husky with emotion, carried the weight of countless restless nights spent praying for redemption. As the pair shared this quiet pact amid the soft glow of the fire, the sound of rapid hoofbeats thundered once more on the hard ground outside. The night air, still heavy with the scent of damp sand and burning sage, carried the foreboding noise closer. In a heartbeat of dread, Amos re-entered with anxious eyes, announcing more tracks, and now a dark silhouette near the eastern boundary. The figure, partially concealed by the tall, ghostly mesquite, appeared to be a scout for the cattle baron, an emissary of the ruthless man bent on seizing the fertile valley and reclaiming what was stolen from Mara's family. As the distant silhouette loomed larger, the tension within the homestead reached a fever pitch. Caleb's heart pounded, each beat a somber drum of risk and determination. The sacred deed, with its cryptic emblem and tantalizing promise of fertile land, lay as both their salvation and their peril. Outside, the wind's wail mingled with a cacophony of distant, approaching sounds. The threat was now unmistakably near. Every shadow and every gust left them to wonder. Could they withstand the impending storm of the cattle baron's retribution, or would their newfound hope be snuffed out like a lonely flame on a cold desert night? The once resolute adobe homestead now trembled, as if echoing the uncertainty within the hearts of its inhabitants. The map's clues, etched in faded ink on the crumbly parchment, pointed toward a distant ridge where the crescent met the star, a hidden valley that shimmered on the horizon like an oasis of redemption. Caleb's mind swirled with visions of a lush, water-filled paradise, a miracle that might fulfill his late wife's dreams and heal the scars of a broken past. Yet the approaching threat, embodied in the scout's grim silhouette, hung like a dire omen over that very vision. In that strange silence, as the wind moaned through the crumbling adobe and the prairie seemed to hold its breath, Caleb met Mara's eyes. The vulnerability and uncertainty that were mutual, a shared understanding of the stakes. This deed was their last hope, a fragile thread connecting them to a future where barren lands could burst with life, where past betrayals might be forgiven, and where lost souls could finally find peace. With the dark silhouette of the scout drawing ever nearer and the sacred map's promise glimmering in the twilight, will Caleb and Mara's fragile hope withstand the encroaching threat? And what dreadful truth will the coming ambush reveal about the legacy Mara has long concealed? Moonlight bled secrets over the Wyoming prairie as the homestead's adobe stood defiant against the encroaching darkness. The sound of approaching hoofbeats, steady and menacing, merged with the low murmur of a distant harmonica. In that moment, as torchlight flared on the horizon where dust swirled and sagebrush whispered ancient sorrows, a lone rider silhouette emerged, an omen of the threat that now closed in. The ambush was near. Inside Silver Seraph Homestead, Caleb Harrow moved with deliberate caution. The cool night air seeped into the cracked wooden door as he stood in the narrow foyer, his gaze fixed on the gathering figures outside. His rugged face, lined with grief and tempered by years of lonely prayer for a miracle to restore his barren fields, betrayed little emotion, yet his eyes burned with quiet resolve. He had fought so many demons before, none so daunting as those that sought to steal the only hope he had kindled in Mara's mysterious deed. Across the room, Mara huddled near a low, rough-hewn table, cradling little Jem in her arms. Her delicate features were softened by the trembling glow of a single lantern that fought against the darkness. The gold band on her wrist, still glimmering faintly, rested as a silent testament to a past laced with both sorrow and defiance. Earlier that day, as she had reluctantly revealed that the cryptic deed hidden in her tattered satchel proved her family's claim to a fertile valley, her voice had wavered under the weight of memories too painful to share completely. Now, with the sinister threat of Thaddeus Kane's men circling ever closer, the fragile bond between her and Caleb was about to be tested in the crucible of danger. Amos, Caleb's loyal ranch hand, whose weathered face bore the wisdom of many relentless seasons, had returned moments before with dire news. "Sir, they're here. Kane's men have set up around the eastern and western perimeters," he had whispered, voice low and edged with grim finality. The note he carried, a hastily scrawled message urging to surrender the deed or facing ruin, had already chilled Caleb's blood. Amos's words had confirmed all the unspoken fears circulating like a vagrant wind. Now, as the distant hooves thunder across the hard-packed earth outside, every shadow on the adobe seemed to tremble with portent. Caleb stepped toward the heavy door and, with a steady hand, opened it a slight crack to gather what he could see. Outside, the torchlit plains revealed dark forms in formation. Among them, a commanding figure, none other than Thaddeus Kane, the ruthless cattle baron whose silver tongue and cruel past had stolen Mara's family's legacy, stood astride a massive horse. His gaze, cold and calculating, swept over the homestead with a mixture of entitlement and malice. "You can't have her," Kane called out in a voice that carried like gunfire on the wind. "The deed belongs to me by right, and I will reclaim what is mine." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I won't yield," he murmured fiercely, stepping away from the door to gather his courage. His mind churned with memories of his late wife, the tender dreams she had once held for a rejuvenated land, and his own silent prayers for redemption. The deed, with its delicate crescent and star, was more than parchment. It was the key to a fertile valley, a miracle he had longed for in the barren stretches of his grief. "If you seek that which you stole, you must pass through me first," he declared in a low, controlled voice, every word measured like a shot fired in the dark. Inside, Mara's heart pounded as she listened to the confrontation from behind a partially open door. The ambush's tension seeped into every fiber of her being. Slowly, with trembling resolve, she clutched the deed and the gold band even closer, the symbols of her lost heritage and hidden truth. "They took everything from us," she whispered to herself, voice scarcely audible above the clamor of the approaching threat. "But I will not let our story end in ruin." Outside the homestead, the night air vibrated with a rising crescendo, the crunch of boots on gravel, the hissing of wind through tall grass, and the shock of rifles' crack that split the silence. Kane's men began their assault, their torches swinging like fiery scythes under the starry dome. With precision born from years of hardship on these unforgiving lands, Caleb moved swiftly to rally his defenses. "Amos, Tommy, prepare the barricades. We cannot let them overrun us tonight," he commanded, his voice a low rumble that mixed determination with a tinge of desperation. In a quiet, hurried exchange, Amos and Tommy set about fortifying windows and doorways with scavenged planks and overturned furniture. Every sound, the creak of wood, the echo of shouted orders, carried the weight of a life worth protecting. Outside, the silhouettes of Kane's men gathered in greater numbers, their voices a discordant blend of threats. The wind wailed in the prairie, bathed in the ghostly silver of moonlight, became a battlefield of wavering hope and imminent peril. Amid the rising tension, Mara, with her eyes wide and luminous in the flickering lantern light, finally spoke to Caleb in a voice barely above a whisper. I must tell you all of it," she said, her tone wavering as raw as the night air. "My family was betrayed by someone I once called kin, my uncle, who sold our claim for his own gain. They took the fertile valley, leaving me with nothing but this deed, this curse of remembrance. Her confession quivered between guilt and sorrow, each word cutting to the fragile barrier that had kept her mistrust intact. Tears glistened briefly in the corners of her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, as if determined to hold on to what little dignity she had left. Caleb's broad face softened with empathy, yet his heart ached with his own haunted memories. "We've both known loss," he murmured, placing a weathered hand gently on her shoulder. "Your truth and my prayers, perhaps together, they can forge a future where the past no longer haunts us." His words, spoken in a tone of resigned hope, bonded them further even as the ominous threat pressed at the fringes of their sanctuary. Just then, a sudden sharp cry from outside shattered the brief calm, a cry mingled with the clatter of hurried hooves and the unmistakable snap of rifle fire. Through the gap in the door, Caleb saw a flash of light as one of Kane's men hurled a burning torch against the western wall. The fire's glow flickered angrily, casting long, twisting shadows that danced like vengeful spirits across the adobe. In that perilous instant, every heartbeat, every whispered prayer seemed suspended in time. Can we withstand this attack? Caleb wondered silently as he tightened his grip on the worn rifle. The land beneath him, scarred by drought and defiance, now became the stage for a desperate struggle between those who sought to reclaim stolen heritage and those who desired to subjugate it. The tension of the moment pressed like the relentless desert sun, and even the distant mesquite trees bowed under the weight of the gathering storm of human rancor. Amos, returning hastily with a grim report, announced, "They're surging from the east." More hoofbeats, and I saw a figure at the ridge. His words were clipped and urgent, heightening the dread that gripped the homestead. The figure at the ridge, a dim, indistinct silhouette, loomed like a harbinger of further vengeance, as if the very landscape were conspiring to tip the scales against them. As Caleb gathered the remaining ranch hands, his voice became a steady anchor amid the chaos. "We stand together," he declared. "For every scar, for every lost dream, we fight. We protect what is ours." The words resonated low and clear, echoing under the vast, indifferent sky. In that moment, as the flames of the torch splintered dark shadows and the relentless echo of gunfire intermingled with the anguished cry of the prairie wind, the fate of Silver Seraph Homestead hung precariously in the balance. With the ambush moments away and the weight of inevitable betrayal hanging in the humid air, the homestead and its inhabitants braced for the approaching storm of violence. The question that burned as fiercely as the torches against the adobe was whether their fragile hope, embodied in Mara's sacred deed and Caleb's unwavering resolve, could endure the relentless tempest of greed and retribution. As torches flare and gunfire echoes under the cold, relentless moon, will Caleb and Mara's newfound hope withstand the imminent assault, or will the shadows of betrayal finally consume them? Gunfire shattered the Wyoming night as flames licked the homestead's adobe, and shadows danced like vengeful ghosts over the barren prairie. Under a sky streaked with bruised indigo and silver, the torches of Thaddeus Kane's men flared in guarded unison, while the homestead's fragile defenses roared with the echo of rifle cracks. In that charged moment, Caleb Harrow stood at the battered doorway of Silver Seraph Homestead, his heart pounding like a war drum. Clutched close in his calloused hand was the cryptic deed, its faded crescent moon and star emblem pulsing softly in the firelight. While behind him, Mara and Little Jem huddled together, their eyes wide in terror and defiance. The ambush had begun, and the promise of the fertile valley, the miracle his departed wife had long prayed for, hung precariously in the balance. Outside, the Wyoming prairie roared with unrest. The relentless wind, once a gentle companion at dawn, now howled like a wild beast, scattering embers and whispering of long-held grudges. Thaddeus Kane, ruthless and commanding, emerged from the swirling mass of attackers at the head of his men, his voice low and caustic, cut to the tumult. "Surrender the deed, Caleb, or all you hold dear will be lost." His eyes, dark and predatory beneath a blood-stained hat, glimmered with a promise of spoils. Yet Caleb's face remained stoic, carved with unyielding determination and the sorrow of unhealed loss. "Not while we still breathe," Caleb growled, his own rifle raised steadily as he advanced. Each measured step a defiant challenge to the greed that threatened them. The fury of the ambush rippled through the homestead as Amos and Tommy, loyal as the ancient mesas, rallied the remaining ranch hands. Barricades were hastily reinforced, and the low moan of the wind mixed with the thunder from both nature and man-made fury. In the midst of this chaos, Mara's voice, a soft yet resolute whisper, rose above the clamor. "I won't let them take our future," she declared, her eyes never leaving the deed that represented not merely paper, but the claim to a sacred valley stolen from her family. For a long, harrowing minute, the night was awash with violent contrasts. The crackle of burning wood, and the sharp report lead, the raw echo of hooves, and the distant wail of harmonica played by an unseen minstrel. Caleb, amid the turmoil, fought not only for his own redemption, but for fragile hope that Mara's secret might restore life to his barren land. With each shot he fired, with every commanding shout to his assembled defenders, he strove to cast aside the heavy burdens of regret and loss. His inner prayer, a silent vow to honor his wife's dream, resounded to the very soul of the homestead. In a fiercely contested moment, Kane himself rode forward from the torchlight. His face bore the arrogance of one who believed the world owed him treasure and power, and his eyes flashed with cruel intent as he advanced toward Caleb with outstretched hands. "Give me the deed, or watch your legacy crumble under the weight of your failures," he bellowed. In response, Caleb met his gaze with a measured ferocity. "This land is not yours to steal," he replied, voice low and unwavering. "Nor is the dream of healing it. It belongs to those who suffer and endure." As the standoff escalated, a sudden, piercing cry split the night, a cry from the vigilant heart of Little Jem, whose innocent wail cut through the din and sent a jagged spike of pain through every warrior's heart. The sound, raw and unguarded, reminded Caleb and Mara of the fragile future at stake. In that brief, agonizing moment, the tide of violence seemed to pause, each man's resolve tested by the cry of a child who knew nothing of betrayal or greed. Seizing that temporary lull, Caleb signaled to Amos and Tommy to countercharge from the flanks, using the homestead's battered walls as cover. The coordinated movement, born of desperation and brotherhood, disrupted Kane's men and forced them into disarray. Amid the chaos, Mar moved quickly to protect the deed, to safeguard her family's legacy that had been denied for so long. With trembling determination, she gathered the faded parchment, the gold band glinting at its center, and concealed it in a tin box beneath a loose floorboard. "It must not fall into their hands," she murmured, voice hushed but resolute, as if promising to preserve the miracle that the map foretold. The battle raged on, the cacophony of shouts and gunfire mingling with the relentless moan of the prairie wind. Caleb's rifle cracked amid the tumult, each shot a punctuation in his quiet, desperate vow. Slowly, Kane's men were forced to recoil. The sheer ferocity of the defense, coupled with a strategic counterattack, began to turn the tide. Thaddeus Kane, his face twisted with rage and disbelief, was forced back by the unified might of those who had nothing left to lose. With a final, bitter shriek, he signaled his retreat, and his men faded into the night like ghosts chased from their haunts. The homestead, though scarred and trembling, fell into a tentative calm as the echoes of violence subsided. The torches were extinguished one by one, their final flickers swallowed by the dark and forgiving Wyoming sky. Caleb, bloodied and exhausted, stood amid his people, his eyes never leaving Mara's. In that somber silence, the weight of the ordeal pressed heavily on each soul. The deed, the key to the fertile valley that might restore the land and mend Caleb's broken heart, was still hidden away, but its promise burned brighter than ever, a beacon in the dark. Gathered in the glow of a small, rekindled fire, Caleb, Mara, and Amos tended to the wounded and reassured the frightened. The night's battle had been fierce, yet forged a deeper bond between them, a found family born of shared loss and an unyielding hope. Caleb's gaze drifted to the far side of the horizon, where, beyond the rugged, morning mesas, a ridge shimmered faintly in the pale light, a silent, unspoken promise of the valley that awaited them. "I believe," Caleb began, voice soft and tempered with both fatigue and hope, "that tomorrow we will venture to see the land our hearts have long dreamed of, a valley where water runs free and life may bloom once again." His words, though few, resonated deeply in the hushed circle. Mara, still trembling from the night's terror yet emboldened by her hard-won confession, nodded slowly. "I've carried this legacy with me all my life," she said, eyes glistening with a mix of relief and lingering uncertainty. "Tonight, I fear nothing more." As the early whispers of dawn began to chase away the remnants of night, the survivors huddled close before the fire. Little Jem, now quiet and secure in Mara's arms, cooed softly, a gentle reminder of new beginnings amid relentless hardship. The homestead's adobe, scarred by battle yet standing resolute beneath the awakening sky, set the stage for the morrow, a day that promised to reveal whether the fabled valley, with its life-giving waters, would indeed fulfill Caleb's departed wife's dream. In the quiet hours before sunrise, Caleb, with measured calm and quiet determination, knelt beside Mara. "We have survived the night," he whispered, his voice heavy with a mix of sorrow and hope. "And tomorrow, we claim our future. The miracle that you carry, the legacy of your family, it may be the answer for us all." His words, simple yet sincere, echoed softly through the cooling air. As the first faint blush of dawn touched the horizon, the gathered souls resolved to prepare for the journey. Amos led a small party to inspect potential escape routes and safeguard the deed, while Caleb and Mara exchanged a look filled with both tentative trust and unspoken promises. Outside, the distant sound of a lone harmonica, its notes mournful yet strangely uplifting, drifted across the prairie, mingling with the rustle of wind and the soft awakening of life on the run-down homestead. Yet even in that moment of calm, uncertainty lingered like a stubborn shadow across their hearts. The memory of Kane's bitter threat, his taunt of betrayal, and the ominous note still haunted them. In the cool pre-dawn air, as they prepared to step forth into a future fraught with peril and possibility, a single question hung in the silence. Would the sacred legacy of Mara's deed yield a fertile miracle that could mend broken dreams, or would the darkness of betrayal and ruthless greed forever stain the land they fought to save? As the sun rose slowly over the verdant promise, a newly claimed valley, Caleb, Mara, and little Jem stood together amid burgeoning green shoots and soft, flowing water. The scars of their past remained, but with each breath of the cool, crisp air they embraced a future redemption and found family. Their hearts, worn yet resilient, whispered a quiet hope into the vast, forgiving wilderness. Did they find peace?